The heel broke just as Ada stepped off the bus, a loud, humiliating crack that sent her stumbling into the gutter. She barely caught herself, one hand clinging to her CV folder while the other slapped the dirty side of a Danfo as it sped away, in a cloud of thick black smoke. Her skirt was slightly torn at the hem now. Her white blouse had a smear of something she didn't want to identify. People stared. A man in a faded BUA cement t-shirt let out a small chuckle. She didn't blame him. She probably looked ridiculous. One shoe broken, face covered in sweat, knees wobbling like she'd just learned to walk. But this was not the day to care about stairs. She looked up at the building in front of her, Odum Enterprise Limited, carved neatly into a tall glass sign at the entrance. 22 floors of steel, glass, and air-conditioned ambition. She had never been inside a place like this before. She imagined the cool air inside, the clean chairs, the sound of heels, tapping on polished floors, the gentle ping of elevators. It all felt far away from the noisy, restless street behind her. She took a breath, stepped up on the curb, and tried to walk normally despite the broken heel. Her right shoe now dragged slightly as she walked, making a soft click-scrape sound with each step. Her left foot was already cramping from trying to balance. She knew it was a bad idea to wear these old office shoes again. The lining had peeled off weeks ago, and one strap had been stitched back by hand. But it was all she had. It was this or bathroom slippers, and even she knew slippers were not for interviews. She walked past a woman roasting plantains by the gate, the smell of bowl and burning charcoal mixing with exhaust fumes. A bus conductor shouted something about Odrelegba. A child somewhere cried. Lagos was alive as always, rough, loud, beautiful in its own way. But Ada felt like she was walking through it underwater. All she could think about was what would happen upstairs. Would they ask about her 3-month job gap? Would they care that her last office shut down without paying her final salary? Would they see the desperation in her eyes? She adjusted the scarf over her braids, wiped the sweat off her forehead with a crumpled tissue, and looked at her reflection in the glass. Her eyes were tired. Her face, though still soft and hopeful, carried the weight of weeks of disappointment. She looked older than 24. Or maybe it was just the sun. She tried to smile. The smile looked forced. She dropped it. A uniformed security guard stood by the door, tall and unsmiling, with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. As she approached, he gave her a slow once-over, eyes moving from her scuffed shoes to the dark circles under her eyes. She braced herself. "Good morning, sir," she said politely, trying to keep her voice calm. He grunted. "You have appointment?" "Yes." "Interview. 10 a.m. with Human Resources." He checked a printed list on his clipboard. "Name?" "Adaobi Chukwuma." He found it, nodded slightly, and opened the glass door for her. Just like that, she was inside. The air conditioning hit her like a blessing. Cool, clean, silent. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing it in. The lobby was large, with a high ceiling and cream-colored tiles that reflected the soft overhead lights. A receptionist sat behind a glass desk, typing quickly on a sleek computer. A bouquet of fresh flowers, lilies, she thought, sat in a vase near the corner. Everything smelled of lemon polish and professionalism. She walked to the cuya. Receptionist trying not to limp. "Good morning," Ada said. "I'm here for the 10 o'clock interview." The woman looked up, nodded without smiling. "Take the lift to the 7th floor, HR department." "Thank you." As Ada stepped into the elevator, she took another deep breath. Her fingers were trembling. She had done everything she could. She had researched the company, printed extra copies of her CV, and practiced answering questions in front of a cracked mirror at home. She had even ironed her clothes at 4 a.m. using a charcoal iron, praying the power wouldn't cut before dawn. All for this one chance. The elevator was made of glass on one side. As it rose, she saw the streets of Lagos stretch below her. Tiny cars, rushing bikes, crowds of people moving like ants. She felt small, insignificant, but also brave. Because despite everything, the debts, the sleepless nights, the fear that she was slowly becoming invisible in this city, she had shown up. The elevator pinged. 7th floor. She stepped out into a quiet corridor. Beige walls, framed posters with corporate slogans. Integrity, growth, excellence. The hallway smelled of fresh coffee and new carpets. She spotted a door labeled Human Resources and knocked gently. A few seconds later, the door opened. A woman stood there. Mid-30s, simple black gown, braided hair, no makeup. There was something sharp and observant in her eyes, like someone who had seen too much and didn't have time for nonsense. Yes? The woman said. I'm here for the interview. 10 o'clock. My name is Adaobi. The woman nodded slowly. Come in. Inside, the HR office was small but neat. A wide window let in natural light. There was a desk, 2 chairs, and a small shelf filled with binders. A clock ticked on the wall. The woman gestured for Ada to sit. She did, carefully, crossing her ankles to hide her broken shoe. The woman looked at her without speaking for a few seconds. Then she opened a folder. You helped a boy in Yaba last month, she said suddenly. Ada blinked. Sorry? The woman didn't look up. A boy, robbery attack. You chased the thief. Ada felt something twist in her chest. Yes, she said slowly. I remember. He was about 10. He was crying. They stole his school bag. You gave him your transport money. Ada's throat felt dry. She nodded. I couldn't just leave him. The woman finally looked up. He's my son. Ada couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The silence in the room grew thick, almost uncomfortable. It pressed on her chest like a weight. She blinked slowly, trying to understand what she had just heard. He's my son. The woman across the desk said it calmly, with no trace of drama in her voice. But her eyes told a different story. They were glassy now, just slightly. Not enough to cry. Just enough to show that the memory still hurt. I didn't know, Ada finally said, her voice quiet, unsure. The woman closed the folder. She didn't need to look at it anymore. You wouldn't have done it if you knew, she said, almost like a statement. Ada shook her head. No, I mean, yes, I would have still helped. I didn't do it to be remembered. The woman studied her face. Slowly, she leaned back in her chair, her arms folding over her chest. Describe what happened, she said softly. Ada hesitated, then spoke. It was raining that day, just a little. I had just come down from the pedestrian bridge near Yaba Market. I saw 2 boys, one of them older, chasing a younger one. He was holding his school bag tight, crying. The older one grabbed it, pushed him down, and started running. She swallowed. The memory came back easily, clearer than she expected. People were just watching. A few shouted, but nobody moved. I don't even know why I ran. I just did. I chased the thief down that small street beside the bookshops. He dropped the bag and jumped on a bike. I didn't catch him, but I got the bag back. The woman was still. Her expression unreadable. Ada continued. The boy, your son, he had a cut on his elbow. He was shaking. I gave him tissue to clean it. He didn't know his mother's number. I gave him N500 to take a bike home. It was the last note I had. She paused. I walked back to Mushin that day. A beat of silence. Then another. The woman leaned forward slightly. You didn't wait for anyone to thank you. Ada shook her head. No one even noticed. I just went home. The woman exhaled, long and slow. He couldn't stop talking about you. He said, You had eyes like his auntie who used to bring chin-chin. He said you smelled like oranges. Ada gave a small, surprised laugh. I had just eaten one that day. His name is Nonso, the woman added quietly. He's 10. It was his first week taking the bus alone. I was testing his independence. Her voice cracked, just a little. She cleared her throat quickly. I felt like the worst mother in the world that evening. But he came home safe, bag intact, homework still dry. Ada's throat tightened. She hadn't thought of that day in weeks. She hadn't done it for any reward. She never expected to see that boy again, much less his mother. And yet, here they were, face to face in a clean office with soft light and ticking clocks. Life, Ada thought, was strange like that. Wild, unpredictable. The woman sat up straighter. My name is Mrs. Akinyemi, she said. Head of HR here. Ada nodded slowly, still trying to catch up. Mrs. Akinyemi stood, walked to the window, and stared out for a moment. The city buzzed below, yellow buses moving like blood through veins, people shouting, buying, living. She turned back to Ada, her arms crossed loosely. Tell me the truth, she said. Did you come here today expecting anything to be easy? Ada didn't answer at first. Then she smiled, faint and honest. No. I was just hoping I wouldn't cry in front of you, the woman chuckled. It was the first true, open sound in the room since the conversation began. The tension loosened. Not entirely, but enough. You were shortlisted for this role because of your CV. You came here today because of your persistence, she said. But you will leave here with something more. Ada blinked. What do you mean? Mrs. Akinyemi walked back to the desk. She opened a drawer, took out a form, and placed it in front of Ada. This is your employment letter. You don't need to interview. I already know who you are. Ada stared at the paper. Her name was there, typed in black ink, clear and undeniable. Adaobi Chukwuma. Probation, 3 months. Position, admin assistant. Salary, not extravagant, but real. Enough to breathe. Enough to start again. Her hand shook as she reached for the pen. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Then say nothing, Mrs. Akinyemi replied gently. Just take what's already yours. Ada signed. The pen tip scratched softly on the paper. As soon as it was done, she looked up, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, like everything she had done in silence had not been wasted, like the universe had been watching all along. As she stood to leave, Mrs. Akinyemi added one last thing. Next time you're tempted to think Lagos doesn't notice the quiet ones, remember this day. Ada nodded. I will. She stepped out of the office and into the hallway. Her broken shoes still scraped the floor, but it didn't matter now. Something in her had shifted. She wasn't the same girl who had walked in, unsure and trembling. Now she had something better than confidence. She had dignity. The taxi smelled like melting rubber and stale chewing gum, but Ada didn't care. She leaned her head against the window, watching Lagos roll past like a fast-forwarded dream. Every honk, every shout, every roadside preacher with a megaphone seemed distant now. Somewhere deep inside her, something had quietly shifted, like a stone being lifted off her chest. The paper in her handbag crinkled with every bump in the road, her employment letter. Real, signed, stamped. Ada reached into the bag, pulled it out one more time, and stared at it again, as if it might disappear if she blinked. The ink shimmered slightly in the light. Admin assistant, start date, Monday. She read it 10 times just to make sure. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Today go well, Abi? He asked in that casual, open Lagos way. Ada smiled softly. Yes, very well. He nodded and turned up the radio. Sunny Neji's voice filled the car, soulful and nostalgic. Oruka tidowo, Oruka tidowo. Ada let it wash over her, remembering the last time she'd heard that song. During her cousin's wedding, 2 years ago, before everything changed. Back when life was still soft around the edges, her phone vibrated in her lap. A WhatsApp message from her younger brother, Ibuka. "Any update?" She typed back quickly. "Got the job. We'll explain later." The reply came instantly. "God, Ada, you be Wincho, I swear." She smiled and put the phone away. As the taxi turned into her street in Mushin, the reality of her life snapped back into focus. The road was dusty, unpaved, and full of potholes. Children ran barefoot beside wheelbarrows of oranges and soft drinks. A goat trotted lazily across the road, its bell jingling like sarcasm. Her compound sat near the end of the lane, a tired 2-story building with cracked walls and rust-colored water stains. The driver stopped. "How much?" Ada asked. 2.5. She hesitated. "Oga, 2,000. He looked at her through the mirror, calculating, then nodded. "Drop the 2 there." She paid, stepped out carefully, and began the short walk to her flat. The broken shoe still clacked, dragging against the concrete. Now she noticed it again. The sharp sting in her right foot, the blister forming where the strap had rubbed all day. Her sweat had dried into a salty layer on her skin. Her mother's voice called from the window. "Ada, you don't come!" "Yes, Mama." She climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing in the narrow stairwell. At the top, her mother stood, waiting, wrapper tied tightly around her waist, scarf slipping slightly to one side. Her eyes scanned Ada's face like radar. "So how?" she asked before Ada could speak. Ada reached into her bag, pulled out the letter and placed it in her mother's hand. The old woman squinted at it, lips moving as she read. After a long pause, she looked up, her eyes wide, mouth trembling. "You got it?" "I did." Her mother sat down on the plastic stool beside the doorway and began to cry softly. Not the loud, dramatic kind of crying that demanded attention, but the quiet, grateful kind that came from long months of waiting and praying in silence. "God," she whispered. "Nah, you do am." Ada knelt beside her, resting her head on her mother's lap like she used to when she was small. Her mother stroked her hair gently, fingers moving slowly as if to memorize every strand. They sat like that for a while. Later, as the sun dipped behind the buildings and the sky turned the color of burning embers, Ada stood at the tiny sink in their kitchen, washing rice. The tap dripped steadily. A small transistor radio hummed in the background. Her mother sat nearby, peeling onions. "You never tell me how it happened," she said. Ada rinsed the rice again, then paused. "It wasn't a normal interview," she said slowly. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "She was the mother of that boy I helped, the one in Yaba." There was a sharp pause. The knife stopped mid-slice. "You're joking," her mother said. Ada shook her head. "She remembered everything. She gave me the job, no questions asked." Her mother exhaled, almost in disbelief. "You see what I've been telling you? You think God sleeps?" Ada said nothing. She just stirred the rice, her mind already drifting back to that day in Yaba, how instinct had pushed her forward while everyone else stood frozen. She hadn't done it for reward. She had done it because, in that moment, it felt like the only thing that made sense. And yet, it had come back. Not as praise, not as money, but as something far better. A door opening at the exact moment when all others had shut. That night, after dinner, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The fan above made a soft, rhythmic creaking sound, and the walls glowed faintly in the light of the street lamp outside. Her phone buzzed again, a new message from a number she didn't recognize. "Hi, Ada. This is Mrs. Akinyemi. Just wanted to say, Nonso asked about you tonight. He wanted to know if you like drawing because he wants to give you one of his Spider-Man sketches." Ada smiled into the dark. She replied, "Tell him I love Spider-Man, especially the ones that fly." Then, after a moment, "Thank you again. For everything." A minute later, a reply came, "No, thank you. The world needs more people like you. Quiet lights. Keep shining." Ada placed the phone on her chest, eyes brimming, heart calm, but somewhere, deep in her chest, a different feeling stirred, subtle, almost invisible. A question. Why had the woman kept her name after all that time? Why? Had she really been selected for the interview? Ada didn't know yet, but Lagos had a way of hiding answers behind smiles, and she had learned never to assume anything in this city. By Monday morning, Ada had pressed and repressed her new blouse 3 times. Her mother offered to iron it again, just to make sure it looked sharp enough for office people. But Ada politely refused. She had barely slept. Her dreams had been filled with elevator doors opening into strange rooms, desks that turned into Danfo buses, and a little boy with Spider-Man drawings flying above the city. When she finally woke up, the first thing she did was touch her handbag, just to feel the crinkle of her offer letter still inside. She left early. Too early, actually. The sun had only just begun to rise, spilling golden light over the rusted, zinc rooftops of Mushin. By the time she arrived at the office building, the security guard was just sweeping the front steps. He looked surprised to see her. "You early-o," he said with a grin. "First day," she replied. "I wanted to beat traffic." He nodded approvingly and let her in. The lobby was as clean and calm as ever. The marble floors still shone, and the elevator still gave its quiet ping. But as she rose to the 7th floor, Ada felt a small pit of unease forming in her stomach. Nothing was wrong, technically, but something felt too perfect, too smooth. The HR office welcomed her like a memory. Mrs. Akinyemi was already at her desk, typing something quickly before glancing up. "Good morning, Ada." "Good morning. Ma, you're early." "I'm just grateful to be here," Ada said honestly. Mrs. Akinyemi smiled. "Come, I'll walk you to your new department." They walked down a hallway lined with framed photos, company retreats, charity events, awards. The air smelled of fresh coffee and lemon polish again. At the far end of the hall was a large open-plan office with about 15 desks, a photocopier, and 2 windows facing the city skyline. A man in a gray shirt looked up as they entered. "This is Mr. Sanya. He'll be your direct supervisor. Don't worry, he's friendlier than he looks." Mr. Sanya chuckled and gave Ada a nod. "Welcome, welcome. We've been expecting you." As Ada took her seat, a modest corner desk near the window, she felt a strange kind of comfort settle into her chest. Her own desk, her own chair, a drawer with her name already typed on a plastic tag. By lunchtime, she had met most of the staff. They were polite, though distant, the way office people are when they don't yet know if a newcomer will last. She didn't mind. She had waited too long for this chance to care about warm welcomes. Around 2 p.m., she was asked to help sort through archived HR files in the back room, a small windowless space with shelves stacked high with brown envelopes, many yellowed with age. "Just alphabetize and label them," Mr. Sanya said. "No rush." Ada set to work, happy to do something that didn't involve staring at a screen. She opened envelope after envelope, carefully checking employee names, stapling loose documents, writing neat labels. Then she opened one and froze. The envelope was labeled Chukwuma, Adaobi, July application. Her full name. Her breath caught. She glanced behind her. The door was ajar. No one was watching. Carefully, she pulled out the contents. Inside were 3 sheets: her CV, her handwritten cover letter, and a printed HR evaluation form. Her application, the one she had submitted in July 2 months ago. But that wasn't what shocked her. It was the line written in red pen across the top of the HR form. Reject. Lacks required experience. Not shortlisted. Ada stared at it. Her hands trembled slightly. This file said she had been rejected. Not just passed over. Formally rejected. No interview scheduled. No second look. She hadn't even made the list. She sat back slowly, heart pounding. Then how did she get called in? A cold flush moved through her. She remembered Mrs. Akinyemi's words from last week. You were shortlisted because of your CV. But that couldn't be true. This file said otherwise. So why had she been invited? Why had she even been on the premises? Her stomach twisted. She put the file back, slid it deep into the stack where it had been, and closed the drawer softly. Her pulse wouldn't slow down. That evening, long after most of the office had left, Ada found herself standing in front of Mrs. Akinyemi's office again. She knocked softly. Come in. The HR manager was still at her desk, reading something. On her laptop. She looked up and smiled. Ada, everything okay? Ada stepped inside, heart drumming. I found something. Mrs. Akinyemi tilted her head. In the archives, Ada continued, my application was marked as rejected. There was a pause, long and heavy. Then Mrs. Akinyemi closed her laptop gently. Yes, it was. Ada blinked. So, you knew? I did. Ada's throat felt tight. Then why did you call me in? Mrs. Akinyemi stood, walked to the window again, and folded her arms. Because I recognized your name when I saw the report from security. You had signed into the building one day when I was reviewing CCTV footage. Standard review, nothing. Suspicious. When I saw your name in the log, I remembered the boy. My boy. She turned, eyes steady. I called you in off the list. I made it look official. You weren't supposed to be here. But I changed that. Ada stood frozen, unsure if she should feel flattered or betrayed. You bent protocol for me? She asked. No, the woman said firmly. I broke it. Why, Mrs. Akinyemi took a step closer. Because someone like you deserves a door to open. I watched you on that CCTV footage. You sat in the lobby for 30 minutes that day just to submit your application. You were kind to the cleaner. You smiled at the receptionist even after she ignored you. You left like a ghost, but left. Light behind? Ada's eyes welled up. But isn't that wrong? Your HR? Isn't this favoritism? Mrs. Akinyemi's voice softened. The system favors the loud, the connected, the polished. But sometimes I believe it's okay to favor the good. Ada wiped a tear quickly. You could lose your job for this. Maybe. But I've worked here long enough to know when a gamble is worth it. There was silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was honest. Then Mrs. Akinyemi smiled, a quiet, maternal kind of smile. You didn't get in because of qualifications, Ada. You got in because of character. The rain came without warning. It wasn't the usual chaotic downpour that Lagos was known for, not the kind that turned gutters into rivers and flooded Danfo seats. No. This was soft rain, patient and steady, the kind that made car horns quieter and turned the air cool and thoughtful. From her new desk by the window, Ada watched it fall, streaking down the glass like tear tracks. Behind her, phones rang and printers hummed. Someone laughed in the corner. A bell dinged softly as lunch was delivered downstairs, but Ada heard none of it. Her eyes were fixed outside, watching the sky cry gently over a city that never paused. Her fingers rested on her keyboard, but her mind was far away. It had been 2 weeks since she discovered the truth in the HR file room. Since she stood face to face with the woman who broke company rules, not for a favor, not for nepotism, but for a moment of silent goodness that refused to be forgotten. She had returned to her desk that day without a word, the knowledge, sitting in her chest like a warm ember. Not pride, not even relief, something deeper. A quiet knowing that she mattered, not because of her degrees or her LinkedIn profile, but because in a city that often rewarded noise, she had chosen to act without witness. Her life didn't change overnight. There were still NEPA cuts at home, still water buckets to fill, still mornings where her mother rubbed balm on her sore ankles and reminded her to eat ground nuts for strength. But something had changed. People greeted her differently now in the office, not with grand gestures, but with a nod here, a longer glance there. Mr. Sonia started asking for her opinion on tasks. She was added to the internal memo group. And once, just once, she overheard someone whisper near the coffee machine, "That's the girl HR handpicked, not the one with the bad shoes, not the quiet one from Mushin." Handpicked. There was power in that word. Not loud power. Real power. On a rainy Friday, around 3:30 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number calling. She picked up. "Hello? Is this Ada?" said a small, familiar voice. Her heart skipped. "Yes? It's me, Nonso. Mummy gave me your number." Ada sat up straighter, smiling despite herself. "Nonso! Spider-Man artist, Abby!" He giggled. "I drew one for you, but he's not flying this time. He's catching a thief." Ada blinked, stunned for a second. "That's perfect," she said softly. "That's exactly what Spider-Man should do." He cleared his throat like a serious man. "Can I bring it to your office?" "You want to visit me?" "Yes. Mummy says we can come after school on Monday." Ada smiled into the phone. "Then I'll be waiting." When the call ended, she sat still for a long moment. Her throat tightened. A tear slipped down, uninvited, and she let it. It wasn't about the drawing. It was about what it meant. A full-circle moment drawn in crayons and courage. Later that evening, as she locked her desk and prepared to leave, she heard a soft knock at the door. Mrs. Akinyemi stepped in, holding a sealed envelope. "Before you go," she said. Ada took the envelope, opened it, and found a printed letter inside. Her eyes scanned it quickly. Then she gasped. You're moving me to executive admin?" Mrs. Akinyemi smiled. "Starting next month. You've earned it." Ada stared at her. "But I just got here." "You got here twice," the woman said gently. "Once through the door, once through the kind of act most people forget." Ada's voice trembled. "Why are you still doing this for me?" Mrs. Akinyemi took a deep breath. Then, for the first time, she sat across from Ada, not as an HR officer, but as a mother, a woman, a witness to life's long, winding stories. "When Nonso came home that day," she said, "I held him for a long time. He was shaking. His elbow was bleeding. But all he could talk about was you. He kept saying, 'Mommy, that auntie didn't let them take my bag. She looked like fire and oranges.'" Ada smiled softly. Her hands trembled as she folded the letter. "You don't know what that did to me," the woman continued. "It reminded me that strangers still exist who care. And I told myself that if I ever saw you again, I wouldn't just say thank you. I would repay you in a way this city rarely does." Ada blinked back tears. "I didn't do it to be repaid." "I know," Mrs. Akinyemi said. "That's exactly why you deserve to be." They sat in silence for a few seconds, two women who had crossed paths not by design, but by a moment of courage on a random street. Then the HR officer stood, gathered her things, and opened the door. "Ada," she said gently, "Lagos doesn't remember everything, but it remembers the right things." Ada nodded, and just before she left, she whispered something, not loudly, not to anyone in particular, but to herself. "I won't forget this." Epilogue. Monday after school. The elevator doors opened. Ada stood at reception, her scarf neater than usual, blouse crisp, hands slightly sweaty. Then she saw him, a small boy in a blue uniform, proudly clutching a sketchbook. Behind him, his mother watched, smiling. Nonso ran up to her, eyes bright. "I added you to the drawing?" "You did?" He opened the page. There it was, a cartoon Spider-Man swinging from a tall building, and below him, a woman holding a school bag, standing, between a crying child and a running thief. "She's not afraid," Nonso said proudly. "She's like a superhero, too." Ada's eyes filled again, but this time she smiled, because for the first time in a long while, she saw herself through the eyes of someone who didn't care about job titles, qualifications, or polished shoes, only kindness. And in that moment, she finally understood. The good you do in silence will always speak, louder than you ever can.